Imagine advising a pope, mediating international wars across Europe, and just fundamentally rewriting global theology. And doing all of that without like a single day of formal education.
Which is just, it's staggering to even think
That's
about.
right. Or imagine being a 24-year-old cloistered nun who literally never leaves her convent, yet you somehow end up shaping the modern spiritual landscape, more profoundly than armies or emperors ever could.
Yeah, the contrast there is wild.
It really is.
Yeah.
So today we are opening up the field notes of 4 women who didn't just study the divine from this safe academic distance. We're diving into the lives and the minds of St. Teresa of Ávila, St. Catherine of Siena, St. Thérèse of Lisieux, and St. Hildegard of Bingen.
And the historical reality of what these 4 women actually accomplished is, it's unmatched. And our source material today breaks down a very specific reason why we are looking at them together in this deep dive.
Yeah, because they share a pretty unique title, right?
Exactly. The Catholic Church recognizes these 4 women not simply as saints, but grants them the exceptionally rare, really heavyweight title of Doctors of the Church.
Okay, let's unpack this right up front. Because when you and I hear the word doctor, we immediately picture, a white coat and a stethoscope, or maybe someone with a framed PhD from a prestigious university hanging in their office.
Yeah, that's the modern assumption. But it has absolutely nothing to do with holding a university degree or like an academic chair.
So what does it actually mean in this context?
Well, for the Church to declare someone a doctor, the criteria are just incredibly strict. It requires 3 things: eminent holiness, orthodox teaching, and a profoundly significant contribution to theology.
Wow. Okay.
Right, so it means this person didn't just live a good or moral life. They explained the mechanics of the divine in a way that was so groundbreaking it permanently altered the trajectory of theological thought.
So they're kind of like the architects of the faith.
Yes, exactly. In fact, the Catechism, specifically paragraph 828, notes that saints are the source and origin of renewal. These 4 women provided the literal blueprint for how humanity understands its relationship with the divine. And their work is still highly relevant today.
Which brings up a really important point for anyone listening right now. You do not need to be a theologian or, frankly, even particularly religious to extract massive value from these notes.
Not at all.
Because if you want to understand, like, the architecture of the human mind or the mechanics of your own motivation, or even just how to find profound meaning in a mundane Tuesday morning, or how to view the physical cosmos, these writings are an absolute masterclass.
I love that analogy of field notes used earlier. It's vital here. Because, think about it like this. If you want to understand the crushing pressure and, the bioluminescence of the deep ocean, reading a dry textbook written by someone sitting safely on a boat,
it's just not going to cut it.
Exactly. You want the logbook of the deep-sea diver.
Yeah.
These 4 women were the divers. They actually lived in the water, so to speak.
Yeah. Okay, so if we are going to understand our place in the wider universe, we have to start by understanding our own internal landscape, right? Like we have to map the inside before we can map the outside.
That is a perfect transition because that is exactly where St. Teresa of Ávila enters the picture. She brings a completely revolutionary framework for human nature.
And she was writing in, 16th century Spain?
Yes, 16th century Spain. And she confronted this major misconception about the human soul. Many people then, and honestly, a lot of people now, view the soul as either this really shallow pool or just an empty vessel waiting to be filled up with external things.
It's like we're just running on empty by default.
Right. But Teresa argued the exact opposite. In her foundational masterpiece, The Interior Castle, she described the human soul as this sprawling, magnificent crystal palace.
A crystal palace.
Yeah. She wrote that this palace contains many different rooms, or mansions. And the core of her entire theological framework is that at the absolute center of this vast interior state is where God actually dwells.
She builds this entirely around a specific line in Scripture, right? Luke 17:21, the kingdom of God is within you.
Yes. But she takes that abstract concept and she turns it into an architectural reality. She took it completely literally. God is not just out there in the clouds, The divine presence is the center of gravity within your own being.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me, because let's look at the reality of how we actually live. Most of us treat our own minds like a dentist's waiting room that we are just desperately trying to escape.
Oh, totally. We avoid it at all costs.
Yeah, we avoid our own interiority. We drown out the silence with podcasts. We doom scroll on our phones. We overwork. So if the soul is actually this grand, sprawling crystal palace, how do we stop living on the front porch? Like, what is the actual mechanism for getting inside?
The mechanism is prayer. But, and this is key, she completely reframes what prayer actually is.
Oh,
Well, a common modern anxiety about prayer is that it feels like you're standing out in the freezing cold, shouting a message out into the dark void of space, and just hoping some distant entity is listening.
right, like sending an email and hoping it doesn't bounce back.
Exactly. Teresa argues that model is entirely backward. Prayer is not projecting a message outward. Prayer is the door to the castle. It is an active journey inward.
Wait, isn't this just like a 16th century version of secular mindfulness? If the mechanism is just sitting quietly and looking inside, what makes her version a theological breakthrough rather than just standard meditation?
That is a crucial distinction.
Hmm.
Secular mindfulness is often about observing your thoughts, creating a sense of detachment, and maybe finding a peaceful emptiness.
Right.
Teresa's journey inward is not about achieving emptiness. It is about pursuit and encounter. You are not exploring the castle just to admire the architecture, you know. You are walking through the rooms to meet the person waiting in the center.
Oh, wow.
And she maps this progression practically. You start in a state of distraction. So, living on the outer walls, battered by the noise of the world. But through prayer, you pull your scattered attention inward into a state of recollection.
So what does that state of recollection actually feel like in practice?
It feels like an intentional gathering of your faculties. Instead of your attention bleeding out into 100 different anxieties, you consolidate it. You turn away from the sensory noise, and you focus your intellect and your will inward.
I see.
And as you sustain this, you move through the inner mansions until you reach union. You aren't reaching for a distant galaxy. You are actively traveling home to the divine presence that already sustains you.
That honestly reframes the entire spiritual life. You don't have to build a staircase to heaven. You just have to unlock the door to your own interior.
Perfectly said.
But of course, you can't stay locked inside your own head forever. Eventually, you have to walk out the front gate of the castle and deal with the real world. So when you take action in your life, what is actually driving you? And I think that shifts our focus to the second doctor of the church, St. Catherine of Siena.
Right. And to understand Catherine, we have to look at the sheer chaos of the 14th century.
It was a pretty bleak time.
It was incredibly bleak. You had the Black Death, intense political corruption, and the Avignon papacy, where the center of the church had literally been uprooted to France. And amidst all this turmoil, you have Catherine.
Who, mind you, had absolutely zero formal education.
Right. She could barely write for much of her life. Yet her spiritual clarity was so piercing that she literally traveled to Avignon and convinced the Pope to return to Rome.
Which is crazy to think about. A woman with no institutional power, no wealth, no degrees, basically dictating international policy to the most powerful men in Europe. That requires an unshakable core philosophy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And her entire engine was driven by 1 John 4.16. God is charity, and whoever abides in charity abides in God.
And by charity, she didn't just mean giving money to the poor, right?
No. By charity, she meant active, self-giving love. And from this, she derived a staggering psychological and theological concept, which is you become what you love.
Okay, I need to genuinely push back on this idea for a second, because it sounds a bit, poetic, but kind of lacking in teeth.
You mean?
Well, usually we define morality or doing wrong by a strict list of rules. You stole a car, you lied to your boss, you cheated, it's binary, you broke a law. But Catherine is saying sin is about love. Isn't calling a bad action disordered love just like a polite, softer rebrand for standard sin? How does that actually help anyone change their behavior?
I get why it sounds that way, but it is not a softer rebrand at all. It's actually a significantly deeper diagnosis.
Okay.
If you view morality just as a checklist of rules, you are really only managing symptoms. If you steal a car, the rule-based approach just says, hey, stop stealing cars.
Yeah.
But Catherine asks, why did you steal it? You stole it because you loved the status of the car, or the thrill, or the money, more than you love justice or your neighbor. Sin, in her theology, is fundamentally defined as disordered love.
Meaning your hierarchy of values is upside down.
Yes. And what's fascinating here is that the profound danger isn't always loving something evil. The far more common danger is loving a good thing in the wrong order.
Oh, that makes so much sense. Like your career.
Exactly. Your career is a good thing. But if you love your career more than you love truth, you will lie to get ahead. Your comfort is a good thing. But if you love comfort more than compassion, you'll just ignore the suffering of others.
Wow.
The mechanism of identity is habituation. Whatever you attach your highest affection to, your soul will contort itself to match. If you love wealth above all, you become greedy. If you love the divine above all, you become holy. Holiness is simply rightly ordered love.
So the spiritual audit isn't asking, what bad things did I do today? The audit is asking, what did I actually prioritize today? Like, what was the driving affection of my heart?
Yes, because the rule approach merely restrains behavior temporarily. But the love approach fundamentally transforms your identity. When your hierarchy of loves is aligned with the divine, your actions just naturally follow. And that is the context for her famous instruction to the listener. Be who God meant you to be, and you will set the world on fire.
It is such a brilliant psychological insight. But I mean, hearing the story of Catherine confronting popes and mediating European wars while maintaining this perfect hierarchy of love, it's incredibly intimidating.
Oh, sure. It sounds like superhero stuff.
Yeah, like if my daily life consists of sitting in traffic, doing laundry, and answering just relentless emails, am I failing to set the world on fire?
And that exact anxiety is what brings us to our third doctor of the Church, Saint Thérèse of Lisieux. Because if Catherine shows us the profound motivation of action, Thérèse completely redefines the scale of greatness. She offers an absolute lifeline to anyone who feels, well, insignificant.
She really is the ultimate contrast to Catherine in terms of external achievements.
Complete contrast. Thérèse lived in a strict, obscure convent in late 19th century France. She never mediated any wars. She performed no public miracles.
Right.
She dealt with the daily monotony of convent life, scrubbing floors, putting up with extremely difficult and irritating people. And she died of tuberculosis at only 24. Yet her spiritual autobiography shook the world, earning her a place alongside towering intellectuals like Thomas Aquinas.
Which is wild. And she anchored her theology in Matthew 18.3, right? Unless you become like little children. And she developed this framework famously called the little way.
Yes. And we have to understand the religious culture of 19th century France to see why this was so genius. It was heavily influenced by Jansenism, which emphasized strict rule-keeping, severe penance, and a really deep fear of judgment.
So spirituality was viewed as this brutal, exhausting mountain climb.
Precisely. You had to endure extraordinary suffering to prove your worth to God. Thérèse looked at this massive mountain of spiritual perfection and realized she was just too small, too weak, and too ordinary to climb it.
See, that sounds suspiciously like giving up. Like if you're too weak to climb the mountain, do you just set up camp at the bottom and accept mediocrity?
It wasn't giving up at all. It was a radical shift in mechanism. And this is where her historical context is so brilliant. Thérèse lived during the dawn of the industrial age. She actually went to a major exhibition in Paris and saw a brand new invention for the very first time, which was an elevator.
A literal elevator in a building. That's amazing.
Yeah, she saw this machine that could lift a person to the top floor effortlessly, completely bypassing the exhausting stairs. And she used this modern technology as her core theological metaphor.
Oh, wow.
She wrote that she could never climb the rough stairway of perfection. Instead, the arms of the divine would be her elevator. She didn't have to perform grand, heroic gestures. She just had to cultivate absolute childlike trust and let herself be lifted.
But how does that translate into daily action? Like, does trusting the elevator mean she just sat around doing nothing all day?
Far from it. The little way dictates that the scale of the action is irrelevant. What matters is the intensity of love poured into the action.
Give me an example of that.
Okay, so Thérèse had to deal with a nun in the convent who constantly splashed dirty water on her while doing laundry. And she had to sit in the chapel next to another nun who made this relentless, maddening clicking noise with her teeth.
Oh my gosh. The ultimate test of patience. That is literally the 19th century equivalent of a coworker chewing loudly next to your desk.
Exactly the same human friction. And Thérèse realized she couldn't control the world, but she could control how she responded to the clicking noise. She chose to offer her patience in that invisible, agonizing moment as a profound act of love for the divine.
So the small things become the big things.
Exactly. If you fold a towel, you fold it with massive love. You bite your tongue when someone insults you, you do it with massive love. She proved that you do not need a global stage to be a theological giant. You can achieve towering holiness in the unseen, mundane grind of ordinary life.
That is the ultimate antidote to modern hustle culture. We are constantly told we need to optimize our lives, achieve massive impact, build a legacy. And Thérèse is basically saying, no, step off the exhausting treadmill. You don't have to be a superhero. You just have to be a trusting child doing microscopic things with immense care.
It completely democratizes holiness. The little way is accessible to literally every human being, regardless of their status or physical capability.
Okay, so we have built a really remarkable progression here. We mapped the inner castle of the soul with Teresa. We analyzed the external motivation of rightly ordered love with Catherine. We discovered the immense power of microscopic daily actions with Therese. So for our fourth and final doctor, we are going to zoom all the way out.
We are shifting from the microscopic to the macroscopic.
Exactly. We are looking at the actual physical cosmos where all of this drama takes place through the visionary eyes of St. Hildegard of Bingen.
And Hildegard is just a towering intellect of the 12th century. She was a true polymath. I mean, a mystic, a philosopher, a composer of soaring choral music, and an expert in medicinal botany.
She did everything.
She really did. And she offers us a fully integrated cosmic theology. Her foundational text is the very beginning of Scripture, Genesis 1:31. God saw all that he had made, and it was very good.
Okay, but that seems like a pretty basic religious premise. God made the world is good. What makes Hildegard's interpretation so groundbreaking that it elevates her to a doctor of the church?
Because she refused to view the physical universe as merely a neutral backdrop for human history, or, even worse, as fallen, dirty matter that we should try to escape. Hildegard introduced a concept she called viriditas.
Viriditas.
Yes. It roughly translates to greenness, but a much more accurate understanding is a divine, life-giving, dynamic energy.
Divine greenness. So what does this all mean? Is this just like a medieval precursor to taking a mental health walk in the woods? Is she basically saying, hey, get out into nature, look at a tree, and you'll feel closer to God?
It goes vastly deeper than a nature walk. Viriditas was not just a poetic metaphor for her. It was a literal, operative mechanism in reality.
How does she apply it?
She applied it directly to her medical work and her music. When she studied the medicinal properties of herbs and plants to heal the sick, she believed she was harnessing the viriditas that God had embedded into the physical structure of the earth.
Right.
And when she composed music, she believed the mathematical harmony of the notes was an audible expression of that exact same divine energy.
So the physical world and the spiritual world are not two separate realms awkwardly smashed together. They are woven from the exact same fabric.
They are seamlessly integrated. For Hildegard, creation is absolutely not neutral. It is alive with presence. Beauty, nature, harmony, a flourishing garden, the intricate vascular system of a leaf, the changing of the seasons, the healing properties of a root. These are physical manifestations of divine life.
That is beautiful.
It is. Engaging with the physical world with a sense of wonder is not a distraction from spiritual life. It is a profound theological act. The universe is a living, breathing symphony, radiating the ultimate order and beauty of its creator.
That utterly changes how you interact with your environment. Like, a houseplant on your desk isn't just biology anymore. It is a localized burst of divine energy. It demands a posture of reverence toward the physical world.
And it's the theological foundation for true stewardship. You cannot abuse or exploit a physical world that is shimmering with the presence of the divine.
Man, we have covered centuries of history here, pulling from convents in France, papal courts in Avignon, 16th century Spanish castles, and 12th century German monasteries. Let's synthesize all of these distinct field notes into a unified framework for the listener, because despite their wildly different contexts, our source material highlights that these four women ultimately point to one cohesive reality.
They really do. They map perfectly onto the core directive found in Matthew 22:37. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. Every one of their revolutionary teachings explores a different mechanism of how to actually execute that single command.
Let's lay out that framework clearly. Teresa of Ávila shows us the geography of the soul. The divine is not distant. The divine dwells within your own interior castle. Catherine of Siena reveals the mechanism of action. Your hierarchy of love dictates your identity and your destiny.
Right.
Thérèse of Lisieux provides the scale. You don't need massive achievements. You only need radical trust and to infuse small daily acts with great love. And Hildegard of Bingen gives us the environment. The physical cosmos is not dead matter. It is alive and revealing the divine through its beauty and order.
And they earned the title Doctor of the Church because they didn't just study theology as an academic puzzle. They tested these mechanics in the laboratory of their own lived experience. They proved that the divine is far more accessible, love is far more demanding, and the ordinary world is far more miraculous than we typically realize.
We always want to ground these profound insights into something highly practical that you can use immediately. So, based on the mechanics we've discussed today, here is a quick 4-part toolkit to carry into your week.
Oh, I like this.
First, Address your inner architecture. Spend just 5 minutes today in total silent introspection. Put away the phone, stop running from your own thoughts, and intentionally move from distraction to recollection. Enter the castle.
That's a great start.
Second, perform an audit of your affections. Look honestly at your calendar and your bank account. They will tell you what you actually prioritize and love. Ask yourself, are your priorities rightly ordered, or is a good thing sitting in the wrong place?
Which is the tough but necessary question.
Third, step off the treadmill of grand achievements today. Take one tiny microscopic frustration, a long line at the grocery store, an annoying email, and handle it with massive invisible care. Do just one small act with immense love.
The little way in action.
And finally, pause to recognize the viriditas around you. Look at the physical design of the world, the structure of a tree, the changing light of the afternoon, and acknowledge the ultimate order and beauty behind it.
That is a life-changing daily practice. And to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over as you go about your day, if these four brilliant, distinct minds, separated by vast stretches of history and cultural divides, all discover that ultimate truth isn't found by escaping reality, but by looking much closer at what is already here.
Yeah.
In your quiet mind, your daily chores, your heart's desires, a simple green leaf, what hidden masterpiece of meaning is waiting to be uncovered in the exact, ordinary, unglamorous life you are living right now?
Wow. The next time you feel overwhelmed by the noise and the shallow demands of modern life, just remember, you don't need to stay on the surface. The divers have already been to the bottom, the field notes are written, and the depths are waiting for you.